Welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Monday, October 21st, and for today's headlines we have: Governor Shapiro calls Musk's $1 million offer to Pennsylvania voters deeply concerning. Give us what you stole from us. Indigenous Australian senator yells at King Charles. Hackers steal information from 31 million Internet Archive users. Putin brings together economists he hopes will eclipse the West. Fans mourn Liam Payne at vigil in London. Governor Shapiro calls Musk's $1 million offer to Pennsylvania voters deeply concerning. Elon Musk, the billionaire tech founder and supporter of former President Donald Trump, is giving away $1 million to a Pennsylvanian each day until November 5th. Two people have already won the prize money after signing Musk's American PAC petition backing the Constitution. The sweepstakes is raising concerns among election law experts and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who formerly served as the state's Attorney General. Shapiro is also a surrogate for Vice President Harris' campaign. "I think it's something that law enforcement should take a look at," Shapiro said on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday. "I am not the Attorney General anymore of Pennsylvania. I'm the governor, but it does raise serious questions." Musk announced the $1 million giveaway at an event in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on Saturday. The event was part of a tour supporting Trump. "I have a surprise for you," Musk said shortly before bringing out a giant check. "We are going to be awarding $1 million to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election." Pennsylvania is a crucial swing state this election that both Trump and Harris are campaigning hard in. UCLA election law professor Richard Hazen says on its face there's nothing illegal about a petition sweepstakes, but a closer look raises red flags for him. "If you look at the conditions, you must be registered to vote," Hazen said. "And so this is essentially a lottery that's open only to people who register to vote, so it's either an incentive for someone to vote or it's a reward, and either way, it violates federal law." He calls Musk's actions clearly illegal because it violates Statute 52 U.S.C. 10307C and the DOJ's election manual. When people vote, it should be of their free choice and should not be voting for financial incentives that would work the electorate, Hansen said of federal election law. It would change the nature of voting if people were voting purely for a personal financial incentive, rather than making the choice whether or not to register to vote, whether or not to vote, and for whom. Musk said the goal of the sweepstakes is to maximize awareness of our petition to support the Constitution. On Sunday, the billionaire awarded a second giant check for $1 million to a petition signer. The signers pledged their support to the First and Second Amendments, specifically freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. Pennsylvania's deadline to register to vote is on Monday. Musk America's PAC did not immediately respond to NPR when asked about the legality of the giveaway. Hansen said that willful violation of the Statute 52 U.S.C. code comes with a $10,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. "I don't think it would be likely that he would suffer such a serious fine," Hansen said of Musk. "Although if he was warned that this is illegal activity and continued to do it, I think that would create a different kind of situation." Give us what you stole from us. Indigenous Australian senator yells at King Charles. An Indigenous senator told King Charles III that Australia is not his land, and as the British royal visited Australia's parliament on Monday. Senator Lydia Thorpe was escorted out of parliamentary reception for the royal couple after shouting that British colonizers had taken Indigenous land and bones. "You committed genocide against our people," she shouted. "Give us what you stole from us. Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people. You destroyed our land. Give us a treaty. We want a treaty." No treaty was ever struck between British colonizers and Australia's Indigenous peoples. Charles spoke quietly with Albanese while security officials stopped Thorpe from approaching. "This is not your land. You are not my king," Thorpe yelled as she was ushered from the hall. Thorpe is renowned for high-profile protest action. When she was affirmed as senator in 2022, she wasn't allowed to describe the then monarch as colonizing Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She briefly blocked a police float in Sydney gay and lesbian Mardi Gras last year by lying on the street in front of it. Last year, she was also banned for life from a Melbourne strip club after videos emerged of her abusing male patrons. Albanese, who wants the country to become a republic with an Australian head of state, made an oblique reference to the issue in his speech welcoming the monarch. "You have shown great respect for Australians, even during times when we have debated the future of our own constitutional arrangements and the nature of our relationship with the Crown," Albanese said. But he said, "Nothing stands still." Opposition leader Peter Dutton, who wants to keep the British King as Australia's monarch, said that many supporters of the Republic were honoured to attend a reception for the Charles and Queen Camilla at Parliament House in the capital Canberra. "People have had haircuts, people have shined shoes, suits have been pressed, and that's just the Republicans," Dutton quipped. But Australia's six-state government signed their support for an Australian head of state by declining invitations to the reception. They said that they had more pressing engagements on Monday, but monarchists agree the royals have been snubbed. Charles used to start off his speech to thank Canberra Indigenous elder Auntie Violet Sheridan for a traditional welcome to the King and Queen. "Let me say how deeply I appreciate this morning's moving welcome to country ceremony, which offers me the opportunity to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the Nungola people and the First Nations people who have loved and cared for this continent for 65,000 years, Charles said. "Throughout my life, Australia's First Nations people have done me a great honor of sharing so generously their stories and culture. I can only say how much my own experience has been shaped and strengthened by such traditional wisdom," Charles added. Australians decided a referendum in 1999 to retain Queen Elizabeth II as head of state. That issue is widely regarded to have been the consequence of disagreement about how a president should be chosen, rather than the majority support for the monarch. Albanese has ruled out holding another referendum on the subject during his current 3-year term in government, but it is possible that his center-left Labour Party is re-elected at elections due by May next year. Charles was drawn into Australia's Republic debate months before his visit. The Australian Republican movement, who wants Australia to sever its constitutional ties with Britain, wrote to Charles in December last year, requesting a meeting in Australia and for the King to advocate their cause. Buckingham Palace politely wrote back in March to say the King's meetings would be decided upon by the Australian government. A meeting with the Arm does not appear on the official itinerary. Whether Australia becomes a republic is a matter for the Australian people to decide, the Buckingham Palace letter said. Early on Monday, Charles and Camilla laid wreaths at the Australian War Memorial, then shook hands with well-wishers on the second day of their visit. The memorial estimated 4,000 people had turned out to see the couple. Charles, 75, is being treated for cancer, which has led to a scaled-down itinerary. It is Charles' 17th trip to Australia, and the first since he became king in 2022. It is the first visit to Australia by a reigning British monarch since his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, traveled to the distant nation in 2011. Charles and Camilla rested the day after their arrival late Friday before making their first public appearance of the trip at a church service in Sydney on Sunday. They then flew to Canberra, where they visited the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier and a reception at Parliament House. Before leaving the War Memorial, they stopped to greet hundreds of people who gathered under clear skies flying Australian flags. The temperature was forecast to reach a mild high of 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. On Wednesday, Charles will travel to Samoa, where he'll open the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Hackers steal information from 31 million Internet Archive users. A hack this month on the world's largest archive of the Internet, whose mission is to provide universal access to all knowledge, has compromised millions of users' information and forced a temporary shutdown of its services. The attack on the Internet Archive leaked identifying information from more than 31 million user accounts, including Patreon email addresses and encrypted passwords, according to the website's Have I Been PWND, which tracks accounts that may have been compromised in a data breach. The Internet Archive, a nonprofit based in San Francisco that operates on a shoestring budget, provides free access to its enormous digitized library of websites current and past, software applications, and print materials. The organizer says that its vast cache of archive material is safe following the breach. IA said that it took down the entire site temporarily to access and improve our security. By Friday, most of its services were back online, including its archive tool of websites, the Wayback Machine. The IA said that it was working around the clock and through the weekend to restore the rest of its services securely. In the coming days, more services will resume, some starting in read-only mode, as full restoration will take more time, read a blog entry from IA founder Brewer Carrell posted Friday. News of the attack surfaced on October 9th, with visitors to archive.org sharing screenshots showing that the website's JavaScript had been defaced with a message that the Internet Archive has been breached. Have you ever felt like the Internet Archive runs on sticks and is constantly on the verge of suffering a catastrophic security breach? It just happened. See 31 million of you on Have I Been PWND, read the JavaScript alert that momentarily appeared on the site. We're taking a cautious, deliberate approach to rebuild and strengthen our defenses. The priority is ensuring that the Internet Archive comes online stronger and more secure, Khalil said in his blog post. He noted that other recent cyber attacks on libraries, the British Library, Seattle Public Library, Toronto Public Library, and Calgary Public Library. We hope these attacks are not indicative of a trend, he said. In May, the Internet Archive saw its first attack since its founding in 1996, Khalil told the Washington Post, and imminent outages have followed. Since 2020, the Internet Archive has been dogged by lawsuits over its digitization of copyrighted books and music. Khalil told the Post that costly fines from the lawsuits could amount to a death blow for the archive. The nonprofit has yet to share further updates on the breach of sensitive information. NPR has reached out to the Internet Archive for more details about the attack and how its patrons were affected. Putin brings together economies he hopes will eclipse the West. The Russian leader hopes to use the meeting of a so-called BRICS group, which includes China and India, as a counterweight to the West. After Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the West imposed sweeping economic sanctions, cut its access to the global banking system, and sought to isolate Russia diplomatically from the rest of the world. As President Vladimir V. Putin gathers the leaders of emerging market countries this week in the Russian city of Kazan, he wants to show the West that he's important allies on his side. Russia is hosting a so-called BRICS group, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This year, the meeting, which begins Tuesday, has expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. Its wonky name notwithstanding, it was coined by a Wall Street banker in 2001. BRICS now includes countries representing almost half of the world's population and more than 35% of global economic output, adjusted by purchasing power. The conference is intended to present a hefty showcase of economic might, but also entice new countries into a coalition Russia hopes to build that would form a new world order not dominated by the West. This summit is about Putin punching back, said Alexander Gabuev, director of the Carnegie Russia or Eurasia Center in Berlin. Mr. Putin presents his country's war in Ukraine as a spearhead of destroying the old world order and helping build a new one, Mr. Gabuev said. And BRICS is the most potent and representative structure of this new world order, he added. That was the message Mr. Putin emphasized at a meeting of officials and businessmen last week in Moscow ahead of the summit. In the last decade, over 40% of the growth in global GDP of the entire world's economic dynamics came from the BRICS countries, Mr. Putin said, asserting that the developed group of 7 countries is playing a declining role in the global economy. The gap is widening, and it will further widen. This is inevitable, he said. Mr. Putin was unable to travel to last year's summit in South Africa because of the warrant for his arrest, issued by the International Criminal Court, to which South Africa is a signatory. While other leaders held high-level bilateral meetings, Mr. Putin was forced to deliver his speech and hold all meetings virtually. This year, Mr. Putin said he would love to have 17 bilateral meetings in addition to those larger group formats. Standing next to all these leaders shaking hands and taking pictures, Vladimir Putin will be trying to tell the world that Russia is not isolated, Mr. Gabuev said. The Russian leader will be projecting that Russia is a part of the global majority and part of the international community that is trying to isolate Russia is the West, Mr. Gabuev said. so the West is, by default, the global minority that's ostracizing Russia. Beijing and Moscow are keen to see BRICS expand further, and the Kremlin invited representatives from another 20 countries who have expressed interest in membership to participate in this year's summit. Both capitals have pushed proposals to dramatically change the global financial system. As the previous summit, there was discussion of creating a BRICS currency, which did not materialize. This year, the dominant proposal for the BRICS payment system, known as the BRICS Bridge, that would help Russia circumvent the issue it's had sending and receiving money in global commerce because of sanctions. Russia's finance minister, Anton Solonov, has tried to muster support for the organization that could serve as a replacement for the International Monetary Fund, which froze contract with Moscow in 2022. While Mr. Putin could get to play the role of host, China's top leader, Xi Jinping, will arrive at the summit in a commanding position. Mr. Xi is expected to hold a bilateral meeting with Mr. Putin, which would mark the fourth face-to-face meeting between the two leaders since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Despite growing pressure from the West on China not to aid Russia's war effort, Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin have deepened their relationship in no small part because of their shared grievances towards the United States. The host nation of the BRICS gathering has grown ever more reliant on Beijing to sustain its war, and China represents more than 60% of the grouping's economic output. It was roughly 70% before the addition of Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. China's economic heft within the group allows Beijing to pledge more investments and loans to other members. Countries are looking for economic benefits from this association, said Henry Hua Wang, president of the Center for China and Globalization in Beijing. That's what makes BRICS so attractive, and China being the largest economy at BRICS makes it a magnet. Analysts said they would be watching for how Mr. Xi interacts with Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, and whether the two leaders build on recent diplomatic momentum aimed at easing border tensions. Courting Mr. Modi would allow Mr. Xi to drive something of a wedge between the West and India, which has drawn closer to the United States in recent years as a member of the security grouping called the Quad. It would be huge if Mr. Xi and Mr. Modi shake hands, smile, and telegraph a message that tensions between the two Asian powers are easing, even just a bit, said Eric Olander, the editor for the website China Global South Project. Among China's priorities for BRICS is continued expansion of the group as a way to diminish the power of its chief geopolitical rival, the United States. As Beijing's relations with the West have frayed over a host of issues, none more damaging than its tacit support of Russia's war in Ukraine, as China has shifted more attention to courting developing and non-aligning countries. As more countries join BRICS, Beijing can argue, as Moscow does, that has more legitimacy as a global power than Washington and its club of rich nations, analysis said. China is keen to cast this as a coalition of the global south against the U.S.-led West, Yun Sun, the director of the China program at the Stimson Center in Washington, said of BRICS. The caveat is that the bigger the coalition, the less effective its policy coordination and unity. The inability of BRICS foreign ministers to release a joint statement last month at a meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations has come to underscore the difficulties the group faces as it grows. Even before expansion, finding agreement was a challenge, largely because of the simmering rivalry between China and India for leadership of the global south. While China can rely on support from isolated anti-Western member states like Russia and Iran, it will have difficulty persuading India, Brazil, and South Africa, the group's major democracies, to take a more adversarial stance against the United States. To those countries, BRICS is a way to strike a balance between Beijing and Washington, not an opportunity to pick sides, experts said. But that has also kept BRICS curious countries like Saudi Arabia out of the group, at least for the time being. Last year, Saudi Arabia was invited to join BRICS, but has refrained from doing so, even leaving the question of their participation in the summit open. Last week, Russia's finance ministry had a rollback comments describing Saudi Arabia as a member of BRICS. Mr. Putin visited Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh last December. He said that Russia-Saudi relations have reached an unprecedented level. But the oil-rich country is trying to balance its relations with Russia with the need to maintain good ties with the United States and other Western countries. The BRICS group has been boosted by the return of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to power in Brazil, which will take over the rotating BRICS presidency from Russia in January 2025. During his first 2 terms in office between 2003 and 2011, Mr. Lula helped found the bloc and loudly advocated for more cooperation among developing nations. Fans mourn Liam Payne at vigil in London. His death was particularly profound in Britain, where Payne, a member of the boy band One Direction, rose to achieve fame. "We don't know loss like this," one fan said. Hundreds of fans gathered in Hyde Park on Sunday afternoon to mourn Liam Payne, 31, a member of the British group One Direction, who died after falling from a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires last week. Somber adults and teenagers waited, some for hours, to lay flowers and handmade signs at the base of the bronze Peter Pan statue in Kensington Gardens to honor Payne. It was one of the several memorials held around the world in the days after his death. "We don't know loss like this," said Brooke Kurzarje, 18, who traveled 3 hours to attend the vigil. "This is what it was like when Prince died," my mom said. The loss is profound in Britain, where fans watched Payne from Wolverhampton, a town in central England, twice on the British talent show The X Factor, first in 2008 at 14, when he was eliminated after a few rounds, then 2 years later, when he showed up with more confidence. The show's judges shuffled Payne into a group with 4 other boys who had auditioned as solo artists: Louis Tomlinson, Harry Styles, Zayn Malik, and Niall Horan, and the group, One Direction, quickly captured the hearts of teenagers around the nation before taking on the world. Alicia Sinclair, 22, posted on X the days after Payne's death, expressing her desire to gather with other devastated fans. "If I need something, probably so many other people need something," Sinclair said. As the weekend approaches, she and a few other fans started a group on WhatsApp, which quickly grew to 1,000 members. "We don't expect people that aren't in the fandom to get it," said Holly Owners, 28, one of the event organizers. "But this is bigger than music." She placed a bouquet of red roses alongside a photo of Payne as a child. Liam's my favorite," said Ashley Dawson, 25, rolling up her sleeve to show a tattoo of a verse Payne sings in the song Irresistible. Dawson said she admitted to a psychiatric ward nearly a decade ago after a suicide attempt. She recalled listening to One Direction songs on her iPod, which weren't allowed cell phones in the hospital, and writing a letter thanks to the group she had helped lift her spirits during the worst time of her life. "It sounds so stupid, but I say with everything I have, One Direction saved my life," Dawson said. One Direction's ascent in the 2010 coincided with the proliferation of social media. Teenage fans created handles on what was then Twitter, dedicated to the band, sharing updates from concerts and sightings and posting photos and video compilations. "It feels like we do know them," said Kate Milner, 25, before quickly qualifying. "We all know that we don't really." Milner, who runs a One Direction fan account on X with nearly 9,000 followers, attended the vigil with 3 friends she met over the years through One Direction online fan communities. They all planned to get tattoos of arrows inspired by those on Payne's forearm, which they said represented the members of the group. Payne's death also meant the end to fans' hope of One Direction coming together again as a quintet. "The next reunion will be at the funeral," suggested Casey Hopkins, 22, her eyes glassy. Her 16-year-old sister, Lily, inhaled sharply and made the sign of the cross. For many fans, the outpouring of support at the vigil was bittersweet. "I just feel like he's been let down by society," Lordy Ramsey Ruse said. "You could clearly see he was struggling. The help wasn't there." Ramsey Ruse, 55, traveled from East Suffolk, England, to attend the vigil with her daughter, Chloe Ruse, 22, who lives in London. "It was such an important part of her life growing up," Ramsey Ruse said of her daughter's devotion to One Direction. "When you're involved in that, it becomes part of your life too." The two camped out on the floor seats for One Direction concerts, and after the group broke up, they did the same for solo concerts for Harry Styles and Niall Horan. It brought them closer. As much as it's sad to come here, it's also comforting, Ruse said. Fans bonded over concerts they had attended and the old One Direction t-shirts they wore for occasion. When the irresistibly upbeat chorus of What Makes You Beautiful drifted out of the Bluetooth speaker, the mood began to lift. As the crowd started to thin, the sun broke through the clouds, the event's organizers queued up the group's cover of Alphaville's Forever Young and started to dance around the colorful mound of handwritten notes and metallic balloons. The crowd joined in. Thank you for listening. That is all for today.